There were more twists and turns, knives in the back than you can possibly imagine. I mean, I must have aged 10 years during those 2 months, and it ended up being better than the original bill that I wrote. And that's all due to God.
I think the governor of Idaho should thank you also for the economic growth they will be seeing over the next few years.
They say that politics are downstream from culture. Well, so are the courts. It's incumbent upon the people to take our power back.
The Supreme Court's been on an interesting role recently. I mean, I went to law school. I'm a barred attorney in the state of California. It makes me want to throw up.
I quit Wall Street because it was actually hurting my soul and hurting my heart to be part of something that wasn't doing good.
I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Hi, Leslie Manookian. Thank you so much for joining me today here on Back to the People podcast. You are the president and founder of Health Freedom Defense Fund. It's a nonprofit focused on health justice through education, advocacy, and legal challenges, lawsuits. You go after mandates and any policies that infringe on health freedoms and human rights. So, very interesting start to your career. You started as a successful Wall Street executive. You worked at Goldman Sachs in New York and London. And later you were director at Alliance Capital in London. And you left your finance career at its peak, really, because you saw something was wrong. You saw something going on with health in our nation, and you wanted to do something about it. What were kind of your first? I mean, you're living a pretty good life in New York. Why would you leave to do something that really puts your career, livelihood, and life itself at risk?
Yeah, it's a crazy story, but there were many things that happened over a period of years. But the really, I would say, big breakthrough moment for me was when the CEO, the CFO, the head of investor relations, and the head of R&D of one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world came into our office to reassure us about their stock. So their stock was plummeting in the stock market. It was down 25 or 30%. And they were going and visiting with their biggest investors to reassure them that their new blockbuster drug was okay. The problem was that rumors were trickling out from their phase 3 trials, which is the last phase of clinical trials that a drug goes through before it can apply for licensure from the FDA, that this drug was killing people. So the CEO and this whole team, his whole management team comes in and they're sitting there and I'm in my office in London. I was responsible for essentially interviewing the CEOs and the management teams of these multinational corporations and then deciding whether or not Alliance should put money into those stocks in their European portfolios, international and global portfolios, and sometimes in our domestic US portfolios. And so the CEO comes in and he literally, with this as the backdrop, there's a speakerphone to New York, our pharmaceutical analyst in London, other portfolio managers and our traders, and he looks across the table at me and he says, "A few people have died. It's very, very rare." And he said, without missing a beat, "The bad news is the FDA is going to make us put a black box warning on our packaging. The good news is we still think we can do $7 billion in peak sales."
Wow.
I felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach. I was like, oh my gosh, like he knows they're going to kill people, but he thinks that I should be happy because the stock's going to go back up and we're going to make money.
What was the drug for?
I don't say. I mean, as soon as I say, everybody will know exactly what company it is. Let's just say it's a household name. Everybody knows this company at this point in time. And it was about 25 years ago. That's all I'm willing to say because there's just no upside to me saying what it is because everybody will know exactly what company it is.
Okay, so Health Freedom Defense Fund. When did you found it?
I started it in the spring of 2020, but actually legally stood it up in August of 2020.
August of 2020.
Yeah.
So what are some of your hallmark cases or activities?
Yeah, well, let me just say that the reason that I started Health Freedom Defense Fund was because, going way back, I'd been in the health freedom space for 25 years now, or 20 years at that point. And as soon as 2020 opened, I was absolutely certain, as much as I could be, that what was happening was some kind of an operation in order to mandate vaccines and lockdowns and all these other things. It was a perfect script given everything they'd put in place for over 20 years to facilitate an authoritarian response to a so-called public health emergency. And so I founded Health Freedom Defense Fund because I wanted to be able to fight back. And the biggest case, the first huge case that we won, well, first we stopped the Los Angeles Unified School District from mandating the EUA shot for their employees in March of 2021. That was our very, very first lawsuit that we filed. The day after we filed it, they rescinded their mandate and said, oh, it wasn't really a mandate. It was just a suggestion. So that was huge.
Did you know then that the mRNA vaccine was dangerous?
Absolutely.
How did you know?
So this is 2021. If you read anybody who had looked at the actual data that had been released or understood what they were assessing, they were only assessing suppression of symptoms. And there were tremendous, and they were using what's called relative risk instead of absolute risk in order to deem these products safe. So when you look at absolute risk, you want to know how much in percent. So do you have a 3% chance of getting something after taking the shot and you had a 30% chance before taking it? That's absolute. Relative is before you took the shot, you had a 2% risk, and now you have a 1% risk, and they say that's a 50% improvement. That's how you make statistics lie. And anybody who looked at that data could tell that that's what they were doing. So I knew very early on that that was what was going on because I've been involved in the health freedom community and the vaccine safety awareness community for a very long time. And so the people who are actually doing the analysis of the data that was available could tell you that this is what's going on.
Prior to 2023, I had never actually met anybody in the medical freedom world. I didn't, and I just read the articles, which attacked viciously anti-vaxxers. And then I realized that the people that the media were calling anti-vaxxers are actually medical freedom people, many of which, love the idea of vaccines, but just know the realities and the data and the risk profiles that and the full risk profile, not just what is allowed to be discussed, but kind of like what's really, really happening, which is not allowed to be discussed. But going back to your history, I'm inspired. I'm also very curious about the people who dedicate their lives to this work because it's pretty thankless. It's dangerous. You get censored, you get discredited. There's been stories of people possibly being murdered for their whistleblowing. I am very, very curious about the person you were at the time when you left Wall Street. How did you, was there a medical freedom community 20 years ago? What is the evolution of this group of people, this work, your work? How did you find other people who were seeing similar things? And how did you guys unite over being fired up over it?
Yeah. So let me just say, first of all, that you don't wear a mask on an airplane because of Health Freedom Defense Fund. We're the organization that challenged and defeated the federal travel mask mandate in 2022. So that's another one of our big cases. And then we have a huge case that's still underway. We just lost the last round of our second case against the Los Angeles Unified School District, but it's not over yet. And we defeated the federal mandate that green card applicants from abroad get the COVID shot just earlier this year. We've had many, many wins. So I just want people to understand, have a little bit of context of who I am. So, if you look back, I'm working on Wall Street. I'm having these experiences where CEOs will tell me, oh, we're very confident we're going to get the, power generation project in whatever, Indonesia. I'm just making up Indonesia. And, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, they're bribing people. And then I have this experience with the CEO telling me that they know they're going to kill people. And I remember coming home one day and it was December of somewhere, it was either 2000 or 2001. And I came home and my husband said, "Oh my gosh, did you get your bonus today?" And I was literally like opening the refrigerator door. And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he's like, "Well, what did you get?" And I told him what the number was. And he was just like, and I started crying. And he's like, "Are you disappointed?" And I said, "No, I'm empty." Because Nicole, I was 30, probably 37 years old, 38 years old. No, I wasn't 30. Yeah, I might have been 38. And I had all the trappings of success, right? I had this big, beautiful flat in London. I was a director, managing director. I'm the boss. I have money, position, power, everything you can imagine, right? But I realized, having gotten that bonus combined with these things I was hearing from these CEOs, that I was playing for the wrong team and I couldn't do it anymore. I was literally playing for using all of my skills, all my God-given talents, all my education and experience for the bad guys, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So that was one thing, but the other thing was that I was actually sick, and I didn't know why I was sick. I couldn't figure it out, and I kept going to the doctor. I had never had a sinus infection in my life. I had something like, I don't know, 15 sinus infections in 3 years, and my mainstream doctor in London said, "You need to know. You need to go and see, somebody else. You need to see a homeopath or an acupuncturist because I can't help you. You and I both know you're sick, but I can't help you. Conventional medicine can't help you. Go and see a homeopath." And homeopathy was still huge in England at that time. A big hospital in London was a homeopathic hospital. People probably don't know this, but in the United States, there were more than 20 homeopathic medical schools in the United States at the turn of the 20th century and over 100 hospitals. And it was an extremely popular and extremely safe and effective medicine, but has been driven out of business by the pharmaceutical industry. And so what happened for me was that I'm having this awakening. I end up going to homeopathy school, seeing a homeopath, going to homeopathy school. And the first day in homeopathy school, the person leading orientation says, "Over the next few years, we're going to talk about all these different things." And he says, one of which is vaccine damage. And I literally raise my hand and say, "What are you talking about? Vaccines are the greatest invention of mankind." And he sort of shrugged his shoulders and smirked like, "Well, you're in for a rude awakening." And I remember just like shaking my head thinking this guy's a nut job, right? But afterwards I read a book on vaccines called Vaccines, Are They Really Safe and Effective? And it blew my mind. And the thing is, I didn't realize until in the middle of making my movie that that's why I was sick. That is what happened to me. And so it was kind of in the back of my mind, but I didn't really have conviction. And so what ended up happening was I got pregnant. And once I got pregnant, there was nothing more important to me in the world than that baby. I didn't know if I could get pregnant. And I got pregnant at 37, late 37, like literally right before I turned 38 years old. A month before I turned 38, I got pregnant. It brings tears to my eyes. It was literally like the happiest moment of my life when I found out I was pregnant. And I felt utterly blessed by God the entire time that I was carrying that baby, my big boy. I was almost 23. And because I'd read that book and I'm now pregnant and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh. And that book documented just horrors after vaccines, from seizures to rheumatoid arthritis to learning disabilities to autoimmune disease, autism, speech delays, learning disorders, and death. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how can this be true? If this is true, it means, oh my gosh, it means I can't trust anybody. And I basically have to take responsibility for my life. And so my husband and I, we spent all of our time for the next 9 months, or like not all of our time, but a lot of time going to attending talks on vaccines. And we educated ourselves. And so when our son was born in September of 2002, we chose not to vaccinate him.
How did you get your husband on board?
By taking him everywhere, Nicole, because I did not want to make that decision on my own. I didn't want there to be a fight. So I don't know why, it was my instincts. I'm like, "You're coming with me to everything. You are going to hear this. You are going to be part of this with me. And we are making this decision together." And, he has stood by me. We're divorced now, but he has stood by me. Our son's never, ever had a medication other than an antibiotic when he was 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was raised exclusively on homeopathy because I became a homeopath after it was such a miracle in healing myself and in healing my son. And so once you start going into that, you get into the homeopathy community, you start to ask more questions. Then I started learning about the vaccine issue, and I was like, I didn't even know it existed, in 2001 when I first started
Can I
homeopathy.
just give kudos to your husband at the time for doing that with you? I see a lot of moms struggling with this, and husbands that are just unwilling to put in the time and effort to educate themselves, and that causes a lot of tension and challenge in a relationship, and a lot of stress for the mother in that moment.
Mhm.
And I just want to give a shout out for all of the dads listening. Thank you so much for paying attention to this, because we do need more dads in this movement, as well. And just to listen, dads that listen to their pregnant wives and partners, just thank you so much. I just
Yeah.
have to call
Nicole,
that
I
out.
think that if dads had been accompanying mothers 50 years ago to well baby visits, which are not well baby visits all. I'm sure your listeners know that well baby visits are primarily to get you in the office so you will submit to vaccinations. But if I think that if men had been participating in those visits 50 or 60 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today, because there wouldn't have been that power imbalance between the white coated, stethoscope adorned, you know, doctor talking down to the little mother, the new little mother, and basically pulling authority on her. I think it would have been very different.
Yeah, we need the dads in the room standing up for their families.
Mhm.
It's really, really important. I know it's tough. I know people are busy, and I know that there's a division of labor in the family, but to have dads, standing there advocating for their child so that, both parents are heard, doctors will listen, there's a change in dynamic. But I think you're totally right. I think that we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here today if dads back then saw what the moms saw. Yeah.
And Nicole, there's another aspect to it too, right? Which is just responsibility. You don't put that kind of burden or responsibility on your wife. When your child's well-being is at stake, it's incumbent upon both parents to take full responsibility for that child's well-being, to educate themselves. And that's the thing that's so terrifying about the vaccine issue, right? Once you realize that they're neither safe nor effective, you have to conclude that you are actually responsible for basically every decision in your life. My little boy, I don't know if you've had this experience, but my son, when he was young, he would say to me, I mean, he was like 6 years old. And I'd say, well, we don't eat out because, it's GMO, it's covered in pesticides. They use cottonseed oil, canola oil. And he'd say, Mama, wouldn't it be nice if we could if all the food was good and we could just go anywhere and everywhere and eat it and not worry? And I would say, yes, it would be, honey.
I have a niece like that. She looked at one of the stainless steel coffee mugs. She was like, "What's the point of this? There's still plastic on it." She's 6.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, there's this young generation of kids now that are hearing this stuff, because it is, there's so many more people paying attention. I mean, before we got on, Leslie, I loved your question of what platforms is this going to go out on, because I'm banned on, X, Y, and Z. And, and, and she was, and then you asked me, can I say the word vaccine? And, I'm just sorry you've been through this for so long and have been banned. I do think we're in a new era of speech. I do think we're in a new era of awareness. I think that we're in a new era of press coverage, and as well public trust is at an all-time low in those stupid narratives that just attack people, because people are coming online and realizing that, opposition journalism is real. It's paid for by, big pharma. It's paid for by opposition lobby groups. PR firms are, planting these stories, and they are designed. You are on lists. Leslie Manookian is on lists of take this woman out, discredit her, She's a problem for our business. But the people know that now. The people know that, and I think what's really beautiful right now is, as well as people are now understanding the importance of the First Amendment, um, our right to speak on these issues. So I don't think this will be banned. I don't know. I do know I've been on some of those PR hit lists as well. But, I think, look, like we all can agree. I have to believe that we all can agree that medicines that claim to be safe and effective should be safe and effective. That's just, a basic civil um thing we can all agree on, that if we can all agree we're not going to lie about something that's going to potentially kill you. And that's all we're talking about here. This is not an ideological effort. This is really something that's ingrained in our culture of respect, our culture of excellence. And that's what this conversation is about. We're not like trying to attack anyone. This is not an ideological anti-big pharma messaging campaign for there that's not the point. The point is we want safe and effective healthcare. That's it.
But Nicole, there's two things that I think we need to sort of bracket around this conversation. And this number one is I was getting flu vaccines until I was 34 or 35. Okay. I mean, I was not a quote unquote anti-vaxxer. So you can't dismiss me as that. I thought that the guy who was saying that we were going to talk about vaccine damage in homeopathy school was crazy. I really did. And I dismissed him until I read the book. And then I was like, wait, it has 960 footnotes in the back of the book, in the mainstream medical literature, in mainstream newspapers, and all these things. Why is this not everywhere today? That's one thing. And the other thing is, yes, medicines should be safe and effective. Vaccines should be subjected to the highest standards of all because they are given to healthy people. They are not given as a medicine to someone to try and help them, cure them, or handle pain or manage an illness or something like that. They are given to prevent illness, to actually create immunity. And if they don't do that, if they don't create immunity, if they don't prevent illness, and if they harm you, then we need to have a serious conversation about them. And unfortunately, that is the case. So we should really subject them to the highest standard of all because we're giving them to our newborns, to our young children, to people to try and help them, right? And there's nothing wrong with them already. So I think they should be held to a higher standard, frankly.
Absolutely. And by definition, can they even be called a vaccine if they don't stop the spread of a right?
Well, did you hear about what happened for Health Freedom Defense Fund last week? I don't know if you're aware of this.
No, I'm not too familiar with your organization. I've heard a little bit about it, but yeah, tell us, share.
So I mentioned that we had sued the Los Angeles Unified School District in 2021. Well, we sued them twice in 2021 because first we sued them over mandating the shot when it was EUA. And then they basically duped the court into believing that they weren't going to issue a mandate because they had repealed their first one, rescinded it. And then so the court dismissed the case and said, look, there's nothing for us to adjudicate at this point. The case is no longer ripe. We're not going to deal with it. We're dismissing the case. 17 days later, LAUSD implemented a new mandate saying that employees could not test, and it fired, a couple of weeks later, 500 employees. It went on to fire or displace more than 1,000 in total. And it denied, it said, well, we accept your religious exemption or your medical exemption, but they refused to accommodate them. So they pushed them out. People were pushed out. No pensions. They lost their seniority. They lost everything. They were fired. They lost their jobs. I mean, it was really outrageous. So we filed another lawsuit in November of 2021. And in this case, we argued that the shots do not stop transmission or infection. And we knew this because CDC said that in late July of 2021. And CMS confirmed that. Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services confirmed that in, I believe it was October of 2021. And so if they don't stop transmission or infection, we argued, then they are not a public health issue. They are therapeutic, they are a private matter, and they must be treated as such. We also argued that natural immunity is real and that the Supreme Court case from 1905 called Jacobson versus Massachusetts doesn't apply because Jacobson was predicated on the Supreme Court's assumption that the smallpox vaccination was safe and effective because it had been in use for many, many years. Now, I will leave that aside because I don't think it was safe or effective, but that's what people claimed and that's what the court accepted.
That's great.
Yeah, well, we ended up doing super well. At first, it got dismissed. Then we had a fantastic argument in front of a 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit on appeal, and they found in our favor. And then there was what's called an en banc review, meaning a broader review of the Ninth Circuit. And usually it takes 9 to 10, 12 months to get a ruling, an opinion, or a decision out of the Ninth Circuit. It took 3 months to get their decision this time. And they ruled against us last Thursday, July 31st. And they said that all that mattered was that there was a public health emergency. I don't think that's true. We actually argued that COVID was not smallpox. Smallpox had a 30% death rate. We knew already by the time when LEUSD mandated their shot that the death rate was in line with the seasonal flu. It was absurd. It was not it was not an emergency anymore. We knew from the spring of 2020 that 4% of Los Angeles County residents had already been exposed and recovered. Literally 4% in April, May of 2020. This was known a year in advance. It means everybody's been exposed practically at that point by August of 2021. And so we argued it's not the same thing, and therefore Jacobson does not apply. And the court said it doesn't matter whether or not the shot stops transmission or infection. All that matters is that the school district could have assumed that it did.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yes, it is, Nicole.
That's a terrifying precedent. Are there any appeals available?
We can appeal to the Supreme Court, and so we're considering.
It seems worthwhile because that's a precedent that other lawsuits are going to follow, that it doesn't matter that the vaccine doesn't stop spread.
What it even says, even if a public health official or government, a public servant, someone in the government in any way, shape, or form, so a legislator or a health department or the governor or someone like that, lies and claims that there's a public health emergency, then the state can mandate a medical intervention, not even a vaccine. Basically, where does it stop? Judge Lee wrote a very, very powerful dissent, which was consistent with our arguments, and said, if this is the case, then there's basically, no limit to government power, essentially. That's effectively what he said. And that's what we argued. Where's the line? We want to know, where's the line?
Well, good on Judge Lee.
He and Judge Collins joined him in that, Nicole. Yeah. So this is terrifying, but here's the problem. I believe that Jacobson versus Massachusetts is one of the most immoral, incorrect legal cases of all time. Okay? Because I think it's utterly immoral to tell someone else what they have to put into their body. I mean, if we can't agree that I get to direct my own medical treatment, then, we don't live in a free country. And so for me, that's absolute. Nobody gets to tell me what to do. Okay, if I have mental impairment in some way, or I'm a threat to myself or to others, then I could understand. But that's very, very rare, right? For the vast majority of people, we get to choose. And this is exactly how I got the Medical Freedom Act passed in Idaho this spring. But basically, I just think it's a moral issue. Can you imagine someone telling you, well, this might injure you, because this is the truth. This might injure you, but we're going to force you to do it because you know why? We think it's more important that the community be protected, even if there's no public health justification. So what they're saying is, even if the shot doesn't have a public health justification, we should still be able to force you to take medical interventions if someone says it's for the public good. And they even went so far as to argue that as long as it benefited the individual, that was sufficient.
But what if it didn't benefit the individual?
They're saying it suppresses symptoms, and if it helps reduce symptoms or...
So now you can force therapeutics? I mean, that's effectively what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem is, as immoral as Jacobson is, so it says that the state owns you and can tell you what to do. As immoral as I believe that is, It was in 1905. You and I couldn't vote. And they're using something from that period. But there's another piece. Justice Harlan, who wrote Jacobson, who wrote the majority opinion in Jacobson, he said that none of us has the expectation of absolute liberty at all times. And that's true. That's absolutely true. But it's a big leap from liberty, meaning the freedom to go and move about and do what I want, to being required to be injected with a product that could injure or kill you in order to live a normal life. That's a conflation of liberty and bodily autonomy. And I think it's wrong and it needs to be fixed.
It's unbelievable. I mean, what about the Nuremberg Code? I mean, does that supersede anywhere in this discussion? Does that matter at all? You can't have informed consent if you have someone from the government lying, right? Because that was established. Knowingly lied, misguided the general public. Or, even saying, well, we know it doesn't stop the spread, so it's not necessarily a vaccine. And we know that we've made mistakes in the past and we know it harms people, but we're going to continue lying. So, I mean, this is such a scary precedent on so many levels because it excuses effectively government criminal fraud, malfeasance. It encourages our government officials to lie, which I see in other areas too, but it's such bad precedent all around. And so the judge in the case who wrote this opinion and then the judges that agreed, who was the judge who wrote the opposing opinion?
His name is Judge Bennett, and if you go to our website, you can actually read the opinion, and you can read the ruling, and you can also read my analysis of it. I just rip it to shreds because it is so appalling. I mean, it's staggering. And the other thing that's really interesting is that we had oral argument in front of Judge Bennett and the other 10 judges who were part of the en banc panel, which means a broader panel than just the 3-judge panel that we had a year and a half ago. And we walked out of there elated. It went fantastically well for us. We thought for sure that we had 6 to 8 of those judges on our side. And usually it takes, like I said, a really long time for the Ninth Circuit to rule. And you know what? It only took 3 months, and there wasn't a single concurrence to Judge Bennett's opinion, which I find very odd because they were all arguing in our favor, the vast majority of them, during oral argument. So what happened?
What happened?
I believe it was totally political, and I believe it was completely orchestrated in order to reach a foregone conclusion. They simply could not allow the 3-judge panel who correctly applied the law with respect to Jacobson. Jacobson did not say that any emergency, it said extreme emergencies, and that there had to be some reasonable connection to public health and safety.
I mean, you've got to appeal it. The Supreme Court's been on an interesting role recently. And I think that this particular Supreme Court, they're going to see this case and they're just going to, it makes me feel, I went to law school. I'm a barred attorney in the state of California. It makes me want to throw up because it goes against all of the training that and the dignity of the profession and dignity of the law and the reading of the law and trust in the judges. I mean, it makes me scared for our judicial system when judges go so far off interpretations. They don't have the discretion to do that. They have a very specific job to interpret the law and look at the facts. And I just don't understand how they got it so wrong, how Bennett got it so wrong. And are these other judges, the concurring judges, who refuse to write opinions because what are you going to write that's not going to tarnish your credibility? I mean, that's why they didn't write it, because if they did write concurring opinions, it's going to fully tarnish their ability, because what are they going to write?
Exactly.
And what Bennett has now left us with is very, very scary for the entire American judicial system.
Nicole, I have to insert too here. They broke their own rules. So at the pleading stage, which means you know this, but for your listeners and viewers, When a plaintiff files a complaint, the court is required to accept all of their plausible claims as true and to give them the opportunity to prove their case in court. What's happened is the Ninth Circuit has completely violated that precept of the court. It's required to do that, and it's not allowing us to prove our case in court. There is nothing that we have said that is implausible. In fact, we have all the evidence that we need. They just don't want the truth to come out. And so they're twisting their own, in fact, they're just breaking their own rules in doing so. Now, yes, you're right. We can appeal to the Supreme Court. We absolutely can. And I think we'd get 3 justices for sure. I'm not sure we would get 5. And I think that the same political pressure that exists on those Ninth Circuit judges may very well exist at the Supreme Court. And I see no reason why not. They have not taken any of these cases so far. But I'll tell you, I've prayed about it a ton, and it's like really heavy on me. It brings tears to my eyes. I've literally cried about it a lot in the last couple days. I feel like it's probably what we're going to have to do. And I'm just going to have to trust that it's in God's hands and that the right thing will happen. And if it doesn't happen, if it goes against us and they affirm Jacobson, then I think it's going to actually be exactly what our country needs in order to understand that our judicial system is utterly corrupt. And maybe that's something that people need to realize. But that's where we are, because the Ninth Circuit is so corrupt, it broke its own rules in many instances.
It makes me very nervous.
Calling all curious minds. Thrill seekers, deep thinkers, debate lovers, story chasers. Those who question everything and those who just love a great read. At Skyhorse Publishing, everything is on the table. And we mean everything. We stand for free thought, bold ideas, and fearless storytelling. Whether it's uncovering the truth, teaching a new skill, or sparking inspiration, we publish books that matter. With 12,000 plus titles in print and 400 more on the way, Skyhorse is one of the most dynamic independent publishers. We challenge the status quo. We bring every perspective to the table, giving readers a place to explore, question, and grow. Want the truth behind the headlines? Read Rand Paul's Deception, The Great COVID Cover-Up. And pull back the curtain on power and public health with RFK Jr.'s The Real Anthony Fauci. Work hard, move fast, have fun, and change lives for the better. That's the Skyhorse way. Go to skyhorsepublishing.com/BTP to learn more. Skyhorse Publishing. Get reading, because the sky's the limit.
It makes me very nervous. And, let me tell you what's happening to our judicial system in California as a result is that these private judges and private proceedings are now where most of the stuff is happening, because the Ninth Circuit is so bought in some ways. It's so bought. It's so corrupt. Even some of these county courts, they make me so nervous now. I'm very, very scared about what has happened to our judicial system in the United States. It's become very politicized. But then you still have these heroes like Judge Lee. You still have these heroes like Judge Collins who are doing it correctly. I think about this often. So much of my time these days goes to thinking about who people are, like where their soul is, what gives them motivation to do something or not do something. It's really, it's a form of psychology that has brought me to theology over and over again, because it's the only thing that explains it, that there's just these forces that turn people away from doing the right thing. And we have to pray for people like Judge Bennett, that like their soul is on the wrong course and they're hurting people. They're hurting a nation. Like that is a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals precedent that says that government can lie, government can abuse, and government can then mandate based on lies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that precedent says. That's horrifying.
It is horrifying. And heartbreaking.
And that's what's going to be used in all of the other circuits that, as these cases come up. And that a vaccine, they literally just changed the entire definition of vaccine. A vaccine can now be a therapy. Sorry, I just, that's disgusting. I mean, we've got to take this to the Supreme Court, because that can't just sit around as new precedent.
It's something that's very heavy on my heart right now, like I said, what to do here. And one of our attorneys said, listen, there were I hope this doesn't offend any listeners, but that the gun rights lobby didn't challenge certain cases for 100 years because they didn't want want the Supreme Court to go against them. And once somebody actually had the courage to do it, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of our individual rights in the Second Amendment. And so I'm afraid.
I
I'm
think my
very,
listeners are very Second Amendment
Okay.
pro Second Amendment. Yeah. I'm like new on that as well, and I think it's very important. Our Second Amendment is, the second right after the first. I mean, it's an important one. We have to be able to defend ourselves.
I think there are two reasons that we didn't end up like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or Britain during COVID, and that's because of the Second Amendment and our 50 states.
Yep.
I mean, thank goodness
Separation of powers.
our forefathers were so prescient. It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Mm.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm seeing things play out right now, and I'm just like, how did they know?
Mhm.
How did they know that our government eventually would be corrupt? They knew it, and they prepared us for it, and they made promises, to the future of this nation that are holding true right now, and they have to hold true right now, and they give us a basis upon which to fight for our individual liberties and our human rights. And it's just so great, but interesting. So
Can I say something else on this really quick, Nicole? Because I think it just came to mind, but it's really important. And that is that they say that politics are downstream from culture. Well, so are the courts.
yeah,
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's so important for we, the people, to engage. I think Americans have really erred in not in taking their eye off the ball for 100 years. We haven't been engaged. We haven't been showing up at school board meetings. We don't run for public office. We don't, literally show our outrage at the corruption in Congress and in our state houses. We don't insist that our city councils actually represent our interests. We're allowing all this stuff to happen. And the truth is that if we stand up, if we show up, it will have an impact. And then what happens is then the courts will follow. And I think that this is the real issue. It's incumbent upon the people to take our power back. And until we do so, they're basically going to run roughshod over us because they have been able to for a century. And that's where we are. And so it's like we either show up and get loud and maybe even, a little unruly. I'm not saying commit any crimes or be violent. I'm just saying show up and insist, right? Like get in the way from illegal proceedings. If we don't do that, then things aren't going to change. And if we do that, then I think we really have hope.
well, California is such a tough one because every time you try to do something and push something forward, like for instance, recall Mayor Bass, which I tried to do, and we had
Thank you.
consensus around it. We being, we the people, I took polls online. I called all of the top, leaders in the LA County region, Malibu, everyone I spoke to. I looked for people who said, don't do it. And I had a few who eventually said, don't do it. But the majority, the grand majority, the we the people majority want to recall Mayor Bass. And so we put it together. We did this heroic campaign to put it together. We were ready to collect signatures. And then I get a call from Rick Caruso, who everyone was looking to run against her, take the seat, do a great job, restore LA, and then maybe go on and become, California's next heroic governor. I get a call. He says he has to come out against it. And so he publicly came out against the recall. And at that point, I can't continue on with the recall as the guy is coming out publicly against it, who we would want to take the seat. So it's it was very, very problematic, and I see that happening a lot in places like California, Oregon, Washington, places that call themselves liberal, is that the middle, the common sense middle, the independents, the ones who actually have capacity to lead, they're so terrified of what our culture has become. They're so terrified of being canceled by the culture. They're so terrified of being villainized. They're terrified of their businesses going under because they're not following the woke status quo. And I think they're wrong, because everyone that I've seen who has actually come out against the status quo and has spoken up on behalf of we the people, they're actually very well received. And when you build your success on that, that's heroic. That's what propels us and gets us out of the muck. It's like the truck that pulls, the trailer out of the muck. And yes, it's risky. It's fearful. You do take a risk, as you have taken a risk to do this work, but we have a moral obligation to do so. Right. And you've said that. You've said that a few times during this conversation. I've never really fully understood when people say we have a moral obligation to stand up for our constitutional rights. Well, we actually have a moral obligation to care for our neighbors. We have a moral obligation to care for those injured by a corrupt system. We have a moral obligation to care for ourselves. Right? That's a God-given responsibility. Like life is precious. You must care for yourself. You must care for your children. And when you follow that chain of reasoning through, like, what is our moral responsibility to act? Like that's how I think about it personally. How do we get other people to think about it? I don't know. I don't have an answer for, but the reasoning that I take when I pick something to support or fund is like, do I have a moral obligation to do so?
I think, children and grandchildren, right? We have a moral obligation to do good. To me, that is what motivates me. I quit Wall Street because I didn't feel I was doing good, because it was actually hurting my soul and hurting my heart to be part of something that wasn't doing good. And, it's interesting. So my son just graduated from college this spring in June, and we had a private dinner for him and his 3 roommates and their families. And what I said to them, my advice to them, when we shared, like each parent kind of stood up and gave some advice, I said, whatever it is that you do in your life, seek all that is good. Do what is good, because you will never go wrong. And because what? It actually feels so good to do what is good as well. It feels good to yourself. It inspires others. And, I quit Wall Street because I wanted to do good. So I quit to commit the rest of my life to trying to be a force for good, and a force for change on this planet. And I haven't earned a penny in 20 years. Thankfully, I'm in a position, I'm not super well off, but my husband earns a good living, and I don't have to earn a living in order for us to survive. But I still have worked 60 to 90 hours a week for 20 years in order to help people, because it's the right thing to do. And because I don't want to be the person in 20 years and have my son look at me and say, Mom, what were you doing when? What were you doing when they were eroding our First Amendment rights? What were you doing when they first started contact tracing us? What were you doing when they first started stepping over the line about medical therapeutics and redefined vaccinations? People need to know that. CDC redefined vaccination in 2019, I believe it was, in order to include gene therapy like the COVID shot. That's what they did. That's how sinister this is. The point is that, Nicole, when we do stand up, it helps everybody around us to do the same. And I can just tell you, I live in Idaho in a small community, and the engagement because of me standing up is amazing now in my community. We have such a strong community, and these people are fired up. And when I send out a call to action, they do it. They're like there's a reinvigoration of the entire engagement. They want to run for office, for school board. They're doing this and that. That's what happens when you seek what's good and when you act morally. I think it's a beautiful thing.
It's true. Acting morally has given me more friendship. It has given me more internal calm. It has helped me decide how to spend my time between work and joy. And, my work is joy, but also just like hanging out with my horses. And so there's no sense of like guilt when I do something just selfishly for myself, like go for a trot. Because I know that when I'm working and giving it all of myself, I'm valuing things that are for something bigger than myself. And I I'm somebody that was once addicted to benzos, like in order to sleep, right? Because I had so much anxiety and I felt so
Hmm.
isolated with a child with special needs. And I felt so wronged when I then traced it back to a potential injury and, have gone through just some really tough things that devour people. Anybody, it would devour anybody and did devour me. And I couldn't get through a day sometimes without taking a benzo to just, change my brain chemistry, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that's a sad state to be in. And to get out of that was really hard because then you become chemically addicted to these things. And I had purpose, but I couldn't fulfill the mission, right? And that's the challenge, I think, in part of the challenge we find today is that people do have purpose. They just don't feel like they can fulfill their purpose. They feel stuck. And so this idea of like morals being your way to get unstuck, right? Following a moral authority, whether it be, God or our book of laws, right? Just following these values of, do no harm, but hold people accountable, right? When
Hmm.
they do harm to others, that takes so much work, and then to do it well, competency. So that combination of finding one's purpose through moral activity is, I mean, it is enough to get the most sticky chemical addictions gone.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Congratulations to you. That's I know that's a really, really high hurdle. Um,
I've heard
can I
similar
just
stories with people addicted to alcohol too. It's just
Yeah.
amazing
Oh,
when you're able
absolutely.
to act on your purpose. It's a
Yeah.
gift.
I think there's you mentioned some of these things earlier too about cancel culture and we live in a fishbowl in a different way than we used to when I was young. I'm quite a bit older than you, and when I was young there was nothing, none of the technology. The Jetsons was the futuristic cartoon that I watched on the weekends, all about how we were going to have touch screens and airborne cars and all these kinds of things. That was just a fantasy. And today, of course, everybody's living in that, in their little phones and, all this stuff. But I think it's one of the big issues for people today is that life and the system just seems overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that actually seems it's so overwhelming that they're afraid to even take one step. And this is where I think that you have to just believe. And so I think you know that this past spring, I brought legislation in Idaho called the Idaho Medical Freedom Act and ended up getting it passed. The governor signed it into law on April 5th, I think
Congratulations.
it was.
Yeah. That was huge.
Yeah, it's the first legislation of its kind anywhere in the world that I know of. Certainly in this nation, but I've never heard of anything like it in the world. But people thought that it was impossible. People said it'll never happen. People, like there's no way you're going to get a state legislature to ban all mandates of all medical interventions. And we basically did that with a very few exceptions. And What's interesting is when I first started thinking about this, well, I've been thinking about it for 15 or 20 years, but when I really started thinking about how to craft the bill and what to do with it, I looked to existing bills, and there was a bill that banned COVID shot mandates in Idaho. And I thought, I'm just going to take that. It's already passed. Like, they have to be okay with that. If they don't think the COVID shots should be mandated, why should anything be mandated? And so I took that and I just, you know, reoriented, adapted it to my needs, and crafted this beautiful piece of legislation, I believe. But what I did was I just believed because I had the moral authority. Who in the heck believes that they can tell me what to put in my body? Who believes that they can tell me whether or not to carry a baby? Like, I mean, think about it. If you can be forced to take a medical intervention for the greater good, why can't they force you to get pregnant for the greater good if there's too little population growth, right? This is what happens in Brave New World. They decant babies, they grow them for, to keep the population going and to create certain strata of children. I'm not talking about abortion. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just saying that it's about having control over our own bodies. If they can force us to take a medical intervention, why can't they force us to take benzos? Why can't they force us to take ADD medication so we're more focused and we can be, more productive at work? Why can't they make us take antidepressants so that we feel happy and cheery and it benefits society, right? Like, this is the insanity of it. But I just believed from the very beginning, and I've always tried to teach my son since he was young, whatever you want to do, put your mind to it, put your heart to it, and just take one step. That's all you have to do. And once you take a step, the next one is so much easier, and the next one. And I think if we just believe and trust that we're doing what's good, it creates this like massive, massive um, vortex of energy, which supports us. And I mean, Nicole, I have to tell you, when I stood, because I had the honor and the privilege of actually presenting the bill in both the Senate committee and the House committee at the Idaho legislature, when I first stood up there and started speaking and presenting my bill and the reason I thought it made sense, I was shocked when the questions came because the questions were supporting me.
Yeah. Wow.
Those legislators started arguing on my behalf. They would say to the others on the committee, the government lied to us. No, 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 wait. We shouldn't trust them. They were dishonest with us. People don't have any trust in public health anymore. It was unbelievable. And so my point is, believe, take that step, seek what's good, and I believe.
Leslie, I have to say, I've been hearing a lot about Idaho, and people, young people, millennials and Gen Zers flooding into Idaho right now. I think it is going to add, I think your bill is the biggest gift to the state of Idaho because it is going to stimulate their economy with all of these young, healthy, health conscious people who are hard workers, who want fairness, who are going to add to Idaho's communities in ways that no other commercial incentive could have. Because young people want freedom. Smart people who are paying attention, who work hard, want freedom. They want fairness. And I've spoken to, dozens now of people who have left California because they hate it here, because it's the opposite of what Idaho is offering. And they're going to Idaho and they're setting up shop and things are affordable and they're starting family businesses, they're starting farms, they're bringing their tech companies there.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. So I think the governor and the leadership of Idaho should thank you also for the economic growth they will be seeing over the next few years.
Well, the Idaho population actually went from about 1.4, 1.5 million 6, 7 years ago to over 2 million in the last 5, 6 years.
Wow.
COVID helped on that too. But yes, the Medical Freedom Act is really going to be a shot in the arm. What's interesting is our governor vetoed the bill initially.
Really?
It was our legislature. Literally, he vetoed the bill. He tried to carve out all children in private daycares, which is any kid in a daycare in the state of Idaho, because he wanted to hand them to the vaccine industry. And what happened was the Senate and the House brought competing bills. So the Senate brought the governor's bill that carved out the kids, and I was just like, over my dead body. I will not allow you to ransom children, infants, and toddlers in order to secure the freedom of adults and older people. That's just outrageous. That's evil, and I won't be part of it. And so I told the sponsor of the bill in the Senate to kill the bill if he was going to do that. He promised me he wouldn't change the language. He promised me he wouldn't go forward unless he cleared the language with me, and then he went and did it behind my back. It was outrageous, but I had some white knights in the House who introduced my bill exactly, except addressed the governor's fake claim that he was concerned about sick children not being allowed to be sent home from school. The truth was we didn't touch that code. It already existed in Idaho law. And so we just said, this doesn't contravene anything already existing in statute about, and it referenced the statute. So the House brought that bill, and basically the House forced it through. And we got an even better bill in the end because they called the governor's bluff and was like, okay, we've addressed your issue. Here's our bill. And then on the last day at 6:30 in the morning, we added that the bill can never be contradicted by the governor or any rule, regulation, or law in Idaho, and that no healthy, unvaccinated individual may be excluded in the event of a disease outbreak. Because what they're next going to try and do, and they tried to do during COVID, is to exclude anybody who didn't get the shot, right? And so we prevented that from ever happening again. So all I can tell you is all the glory to the highest, because there were more twists and turns, knives in the back than you can possibly imagine. I mean, I must have aged 10 years during those 2 months, and it ended up being better than the original bill that I wrote. And that's all due to God.
That's wonderful. Well, Leslie, I am so happy to have had this conversation with you. I've learned so much about what's going on in the Ninth Circuit. Sadly, I'm not surprised, but it does sound like we have our work cut out for us with this one, because it is a dangerous, dangerous precedent, what they just did last week. And how can people support you? What is a website, or how can they follow you?
healthfreedomdefense.org is our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, which we usually send out about once every 2 weeks. You can become a member, which is only $10, or you can donate if you want to through there. And then I also have a Substack, but we've got a great blog. I've got presentations I've done on there and lots of interviews, and and also there's a list under our legal corner of many of the lawsuits that we've done. We're just about to launch a new lawsuit, or to join a new lawsuit that's already underway in Santa Clara over what they've been doing there. So look for an announcement on that very, very soon. But just, the most important thing, as I mentioned, is that the courts are downstream from culture. So be loud. Share our word. We're not talking about anything crazy. We're talking about the most basic and fundamental of human rights, the right to determine our own medical and health treatment. That's it. If people can argue against that, I don't know, then we're on a different planet. But I just, that's the most important thing we can do, is to share this, to amplify this message so that the Supreme Court hears it, so all courts hear it, and so they start to really digest the fact that Americans want freedom when it comes to their own health and well-being, period.
Yeah, it's a human right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Leslie. Really appreciate you. That was fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. I really appreciate it.